Super, thank you. Welcome everybody, hello. My name is Chris Yigit, broadcasting live from the basement of my house. Don't let the fancy CPA background fool you. Welcome to Carpooling and ALPR, solving mobility challenges at Montreal's largest cardiovascular health center. This is, I think, a great real life use story that I always thought was very exciting from when I first heard about it, and I'd like to share that with you. Just to get started and meet some of the presenters. First, I want to introduce Mélanie Lacouture. She's the CEO at the Montreal Heart Institute. She was really the one who was, first forced to deal with this problem, saw the problem, and she provided a very good testimonial. She may or may not be live with us today, so we have her testimonial. Hopefully, she'll make it before the end of the presentation for live questions. She does work in the healthcare world, and during COVID times, unfortunately, she could not guarantee she would be with us. But the testimonial, I think, does justice in explaining what the issue is. We are also fortunate enough to have Alessia Zarzani with us from the City of Montreal. She's the coordinator of shared mobility solutions, plans, and policy, urbanism, and mobility with the City of Montreal. She was fortunate enough to be handed this project from the beginning, and she'll explain some of the challenges she had. I also have Marc-Antoine Ducas, who's the founder and CEO of Netlift. Netlift is a new smart carpooling application. He'll probably do it better justice. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Chris Yigit. I'm the Technology Partnership Manager here at AutoVu, the Genetec's license plate recognition solution. And I want to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. This is not a presentation, it is a panel discussion. And we encourage all of you to ask questions at any time. If you so desire, feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask the question live, because it is a discussion. It's a panel discussion I invite you all to participate in. And if you don't want to hear your voice or you're a little bit shy, that's okay. You can raise your hand, or you could just type the question in the chat, and I will try to pull it in when the time is right. The only time I would ask you not to say anything is during the video, which we're going to watch now. There's a bit of a video testimonial for 5 minutes to explain the problem. Other than that, it's game, and like I said, it's a discussion. So please, let's get some of that Canadian Parking Association spirit going, and get some good banter going back and forth if we need to. All right. So now at this point, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the video from Mélanie, and hopefully we'll get the gist of it.
Alors bonjour, je suis Mélanie Lacouture. I'm the CEO of the Montreal Heart Institute. Just to give you a bit of information, the Montreal Heart Institute is the largest ultra-specialized institution completely dedicated to the heart in Canada. We're located in the east part of Montreal. Our location is not very well serviced by public transit. We have about 2,000 employees in the institution and about 500 parking spots. Employees are extremely loyal to the institution, which is good, but which means that it's very seldom that parking permits become available. The wait list on average is about 8 years to get a parking permit here for employees. So you can understand that parking already is a big issue for us, for our employees, for our capacity to attract people. Two events happened to us in the last years that increased the tension for us on the parking issue. The first one is that we started a major construction project, and it forced us to move the parking lot that was dedicated to visitors where the employees were. So we had to take out 150 employees who had parking permits on our premises out of the surroundings of the hospital. What we did was we used a school, which is nearby, and we gave parking permits to those two people there. But that school was used already by about 300 of our employees for free. So already we created a bit of tension by putting a gate on that parking lot and forcing people who were using the parking lot for free to go to the streets to find the parking spots. Then 2 years ago, another event increased even more the tension, is that we lost completely access to that school for the parking permits. So now we had 150 people who used to pay for parking who did not have an option on our lot or close to us. So you can understand that this created a major issue for us. Parking on the street is difficult. because of two reasons. The construction first, so there's a lot of construction workers that park on the street, so less spaces for our employees. And the city added some parking permits for residents, so even less parking for our employees on the street. So all of this created a bit of an explosive issue. What I did was I created a multidisciplinary committee that looked at various options. So the group was divided based on everybody's affinities. So we had a group that looked at public transportation, a group that looked at bicycle, how can we encourage our employees to use bicycle, and a group that looked at carpooling. The group that looked at carpooling, they looked at different options and they decided to create an association with Netlift. So the challenges that we had there was, first, I did not have space to add additional parking permits dedicated to people who did carpooling. So that would have been easy to encourage people to carpool, but that was not an option for us. And even if I had space to add parking lots, the way it works for the allocation of the parking space, it's about job seniority. And that is even written in the collective agreement. So that was not an option. What we had to do was to find ways to encourage people who already had parking permits on our premises to get onto the carpool bandwagon. And it was, we looked at different incentives, and the best and the only incentive that really worked was financial incentive. So what we did was we told people, if you bring at least one person with you in your car and carpool, your parking permit will be free. So that was a way that we used to encourage people to do carpooling. Unfortunately, we didn't have much time to implement this solution because the pandemic hit. And the pandemic is putting a lot of pressure on the hospital system. And we're not in a position right now where we can encourage people to carpool because of the proximity of the employees. So right now we're a bit on the suspension mode on the carpooling, but I'm still confident that when the situation will be back on track, we will be able to push again for the use of the carpooling. Really, the idea is we have so few parking spots available on the premises. It's to really encourage people to have as many people taking advantage of those spots as we can. So I'll be available to answer a few questions later on if you have any. Merci beaucoup à tous et au plaisir de répondre à vos questions plus tard.
So special thank you to Mélanie for putting that video together, and again, hopefully she'll be able to join us later on. So a quick recap of some of the challenges they had at the Montreal Heart Institute. They were faced with an overall decrease in parking spaces. Before that, they didn't have enough parking space to begin with. There was an 8-year waiting list to get a parking space from the employees. They're not well served by public transit. And not only after all that, they had to face a decrease in parking spaces. Staff were obviously unhappy. There was already an 8-year waiting list for spots, but some of them were actually losing their spots, and the collective agreements that were already in place, legally were tying their hands on some of the options they had. Even if she did have carpooling, spaces for carpooling, initially there was a disinterest in carpooling, which is something they addressed later on through financial incentives. And many of us know here, the parking situation changed radically for most of us during the pandemic, in that there's a lot more availability of parking, because not in many cases, not in all cases, certainly at airports and in some downtown sectors, but in the medical field, it became more of a problem, and carpooling was more of a challenge during the pandemic. So having said all that, I'd like to start the discussion, and I'd like to pass the discussion on to Marc-Antoine from Netlift. Marc-Antoine, how did you even first get involved with this project? It seems, I don't know if carpooling would have been the first thing that came to people's mind, but somehow you got involved. So I'll pass it on to you.
You're completely right. Hi, Chris. And the real reason why they called us is because they were desperate. technically, she said that carpooling is not usually the first mobility solution that people have in mind. Usually it's easier to, the narrative about adding more public transit or even, private shuttle buses for corporate shuttles or biking. But as you said, we were called by the parking guys who said, there might be a way to put more people per space, right? And we said, yeah, okay, we cannot share the map with you today, but we usually do this with corporations or cities. We first map where people live, when they work, at which time, and we see what's the potential. We discovered that there are a lot of people that could do this. And this is where they started to say, okay, we could give this solution a go. What were the successful conditions? What really changed the project, because usually we do work a lot with hospitals, university campuses and everything to do corporate carpooling, works very well when parking saturated, that. But the tricky part here was the legal aspect of it, or the contractual. How do you tell, for example, I get a story for you, but it's true. There was this lady who was waiting for 8 years to get the permit, but she literally lives 2 blocks away from the hospital, okay? So she used to walk there, but the moment she got the permit, she bought it and she started using her car to commute for 2 corners because she has the right to do so, okay? When we discovered that, it became extremely difficult to add this complexity on it. And this is where the idea came and says, why can't we put the streets, the city streets on top of the available capacity of this hospital parking lot? So we went to knock the door of the street in Montreal and say, hey guys, what if your streets could become an extension? We'll deal with the technology, but let's say that you have a chance. We put ourselves in the shoes of the nurse out there. She's traveling 80 miles a day. Why wouldn't she be able to park on the streets if it was part of the program? And this is where basically we needed to connect all the dots, and this is how the project came into play.
One of those big dots is the City of Montreal, obviously, because the on-street parking around there was the City of Montreal. So I'm going to pass to Alessia. Alessia, as the main contact for the city involved in this project, I'm sure you were very excited to get that project. What was your reaction to the idea? What were the initial concerns that must have grabbed your attention initially?
Yeah, of course. But thank you, Chris, for inviting me. So for start, when the collaboration was proposed by the Division of Plan and Policy, where we work, we were really curious because this project answered a real demand of 2 different types of use. So one, to respond to the part of coexistence of employers and residential in the street parking. Another is point was to explore the promotion of the carpooling through the parking street utilization, like Marc-Antoine said. So this is really important to the City of Montreal to encourage a new form of shared mobility, and the carpooling have the potential to answer at this demand of the different users. So we were really curious, and it's for this we chose to collaborate with Netlift and the ECM for this project.
So the potential of what carpooling could bring was great. You were curious, as you put, which is probably a polite way of saying it. Maybe excited, but probably worried. I'm assuming part of that was concern. What were some of the initial concerns you must have had? Because there's no perfect solution, right? There's always going to be a catch there. So what were some of the concerns that you initially had to think about?
I think like some pilot project, of every pilot project, we need to have at the table the different parties involved. And for the City of Montreal, to make some type of project, we need a maximum number of partners to ensure the successful part of the project. So to convince the borough, the Agence de Mobilité Durable, and the other partner to have a success for the project. This was the first concern I had.
Yeah, so just to recap, there's a lot of partners that you had to deal with. You had obviously the employees and the Montreal Cardiology Institute. You had the borough, which is part of the City of Montreal. You were dealing with Netlift as well at that point. I don't think at the very beginning, at the very initially, Genetec wasn't involved, but you had to coordinate all this. What about some of the reactions that you like? What did you think the citizens would think of that? The people who live there. Obviously, I mean, this was very good for the employees, but what about the citizens that live in the area?
I think the part of the interesting part was the communication with the citizen. So for our pilot project, it's important to explain what is the impact for the citizen. And with the borough, and Netlift and the ECM, we work together for the creation of a web platform for inform the citizen and inform what kind of impact with the pilot project of carpooling had in the sector.
Okay. Did you have a lot of data available in terms of how much parking was available in the area? Did you have a lot of occupancy data that you can use to maybe convince the borough on, hey, we could put people here, there won't be an impact, or we could put people there, there'll be more of an impact?
This is a good question. When we start with the preliminary analysis for understand how much cars we put in the street for the carpooling in the carpooling project, we don't have enough data to the usage of the parking space in the sector, and specifically in the residential parking area, so the zone S3 in French. And this is why we study together with Netflix in 6 different moments the utilization of the area, the utilization of the parking. And after that, when we convince the borough accept and approve the project, we start to have this analysis with daily basis control of the carpooling trips with the Agence de Mobilité Durable. So it's important it's crucial to know the real occupancy and the parking behavior in the residential parking spot. So yeah, I think one important issues and one important thing we study with this project is the real occupancy of the public domain.
Okay, so I want to highlight some of the challenges that you mentioned. So a project of this size had many players, so you had to coordinate, as a project manager, you had to coordinate between the different parties. Convincing the borough, you needed data. Initially, you did not have that data, and that's something that, you needed the data to make sure that the borough would buy in on it. You didn't want to upset local residents that thought they might, be at the short end of the deal, really, on this thing. And one of the things was missing key data, and that's something that I think you mentioned Netlift was able to help you get.
Yeah. Yes.
Marc-Antoine, I didn't realize that
Netflix.
Marc-Antoine, I didn't realize you guys were data experts. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
So that was the funny part, because then again, we were back, discussing with Alessia about the challenges in the beginning. How do we connect, legal and procurement and the division of the Agence de Mobilité Durable, but also the police, the division that controls and issues the tickets. I mean, there were almost 10 different partners from within the City of Montreal, which is not just one big one-stop shop, right? There are divisions and regulations from everywhere. So to your point, in the very beginning, we really felt, I think we did a good job bringing all those people together, but we really felt there was a discrepancy between the political layer. We're really worried about the reaction of the citizen, the residents there, and also the operators, the people like Alessia who operate projects in the City of Montreal. But to your point, we knew how many employees from the Montreal Heart Institute were parking around in the cities. We did not know where they were parking, but they were parking less than 10 minutes walk from there. Okay, great. How many people? We know it's about 600. So we know that the employees do have a footprint on the neighborhood. We don't know where. We knew how many permits that the city was issuing to the residents, but we don't know where did they park. We knew the regions. And now you can maybe use the slide that we prepared to give an example to the folks out there. When we really wanted to put that into our backend, how many spots, how many locations can we use for carpooling? The question was, how many spots do you have? And the answer was, we don't know. We don't know exactly. So we had to go there physically, measure the side streets, the curbs, from a region where we knew that carpoolers would be able to park less than 5 minutes walk from the entrance of the Montreal Heart Institute. So in the center, you see
hold on, I want to make sure I understood this. You
Right.
did not have, no one had data on the occupancy on the immediate surrounding area. So you physically took a Netlift employee
Yes.
and you had him walk the streets.
2 days. Yeah, he went there and he literally measured in meters the distance separating, because you need to know that the data that the city has is, it's like the stickers. They have a location where we know that, for example, from here goes a section to park SEEE, okay? We know that those 2 points, but we don't know what's the distance, and we don't know how much cars you can fit into this. There are no specific color or paint on the streets the way that you have for paid parking, for example, okay? So we did have to go there, measure, count, divide, and create a map. So what's the capacity of the streets in the neighborhood to how many cars? So the first thing we discovered, completely counterintuitive. The first big, reason why we would not be able to make this project was coming from the political sector saying, you will remove cars, you will remove places for our residents. The big answer is not at all. The busiest location we found during this project was 84% occupancy, but the average is less than 50%. So the perception that there is no parking spot left is wrong. And we proved it with this space. Carpoolers coming from everywhere started to park like on their own, right? But they were using 2 types of ways to measure things. The first thing is the app. When they started carpooling in Netlift, we knew that one specific car was carpooling. And the second is the ALPR. When the cameras put on top of the vehicle of Stationnement de Montréal, roamed the streets and took, start reading the plates, we discovered that, oh, this car here is parked on the curbside, it's empty, but that person doesn't have a permit on his car. So we put the little blue sticker that you see on the screen saying, hey, this is a carpooler participating in it, so don't put a ticket. And the second thing is, they made an API call. Hey, this empty car, did they carpool this morning, yes or no? If the answer is yes, no ticket. If the answer is no, we could go further. So because of this, and that was the big aha moment for the City of Montreal, the data team, including Alessia, is that now they know where people park and why. So you see on this image that the carpoolers, genuinely found themselves 2 locations that are highly preferred. We did not know them, and no one knew where we should put that. But back from this first experience, we can tell with confidence to the authorities, you could put green paint on those little rectangles here. That would be the preferred parking spots. You don't need a lot of them. You need 25 here. But with those 25 spots, you completely solve the problem because it comes from the ground up. It's really a crowdsourced data collecting things. And I don't have the space here to discuss how much other things that the city discovered with those 2 cameras. But the point is this, there's a misconception about parking occupancy and street occupancy. And we proved that it's wrong. It's really is not, as problematic that it sounds. But now we also know that if you want to create a program, you create an extension of parking from, one specific hospital. You can do it, but you need the data, you need the right tools, you need the right controls. So that was basically the big lesson learned in this experiment. The first.
So 2 things I want to highlight. You gathered data, and you didn't just go to the city or the borough and with Alessia and try and convince them that this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. You had the data to back that this was feasible. You didn't have to do an occupancy of the whole city of Montreal. You just did it around in and around the hospital, which was the area that was most interesting.
Yeah.
The second thing, which you touched on, but you didn't talk too much about, and in my conversation with Alessia, I thought was very interesting, is the sticker that's on the right. Did identify the vehicle, so in case they were going to get a ticket, the local parking enforcement agents knew that they weren't supposed to ticket anybody with that sticker. What Alessia taught me, which I thought was just as interesting, is a lot of the citizens would almost, I would say, self-police the residential parking permitted areas, and if they saw a car that wasn't there, that didn't have the sticker, that would get their attention, negatively. And having that sticker was almost like a get out of jail card for the employees, because people would see it, and that's why on the sticker there's actually a URL where someone could go, and go to icm-mhi-netlift.me, and they can actually go there and learn about the program. So it served dual purposes, that permit.
Yeah, and this page, we have a sector dedicated to the citizen. If the citizen want to write a complaint for the project, we have the site, we have the sector in the web page to dedicate it for that. So this is important for the cities to know the reaction of the citizen for a pilot project.
Yeah, I'm assuming that Alessia, that was part of the communication campaign, right? Because like with any project, communication is key, and we can't forget about the citizens, because they're a big part of this, of making this a success.
Of course.
Okay, Alessia, let me ask you, how did the LPR part of the solution work for you? How did it work for you? What were some of the benefits? What were some of the challenges with it?
Sure, but the part of the interest part for us is to better know the utilization of the public domain. So for that, it's a type of for the collection of the data. And the other part is important to have this type of data for take better decision. An example is we need a strategy for the parking, by the parking strategy of the City of Montreal. And with this type, with the potential of this technology, we had the data to analyze it to take better decision.
Okay. So just so that we're clear for everybody, because I didn't really explain what the LPR part of this, the license plate recognition part of the solution was. All the carpoolers that were registered with Netlift, that information was almost treated like a permit with the LPR system. So when the city vehicles would, patrol around the Heart Institute, they were able to validate regular residential parking permits, but at the same time, they were able to identify the carpoolers to make sure they did not give them a ticket. Marc-Antoine, I believe there's a second part of the LPR solution that ties more directly to the parking at the hospital. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I think that this was probably one of the most important learnings that we had since the inception of that company. You remember that we're spending a lot of time talking about what we learned about the streets, how people park on the streets, not get a ticket and everything. But what we also did was people were able to go into the hospital's parking, because we also put cameras, LPR cameras, in the entrance of it. So if you did carpool, the gate will open, and you, as Mélanie said before, you don't pay for parking. So the price point of accessing a parking lot depends on how many people were in the car, right? That's what the second thing that we created. So we now in the area around the Montreal Heart Institute, we've created a system where there's a complete liquidity between private parking, the public streets, and anywhere other places that are participating in it. At the end of the day, the plate become a universal permit. So if you're participating in a specific program like this one, you will never get a ticket as long as you can prove that you did carpool in the app, okay? And this was basically, on our point of view, the biggest challenge of this project in the first place. how can we make all those people work together? Because parking is extremely fragmented. You cross the street, as Mélanie said, you're parking in a private park, you're parking in a school park. How can you connect all those things? How can you make a marketplace work? From the City of Montreal point of view, this is one of the most interesting things, because any private, public company, organization, institution, hospital, university can just raise the hand and say, okay, I'm adding a couple of cameras here and I could join the program, okay? Because let me tell you this, Chris, the reason why carpooling works is when parking is difficult or saturated. Otherwise, I mean, people will just stay alone in their cars and park, whenever they want, and we're not going to solve anything, okay? So at the end of the day, that was the big learning for us.
Necessity is the mother of all invention, always, I guess, yeah. Which is the case here. Alessia, let me ask you something. Your reaction was you were very curious about the project. There were lots of challenges. You addressed them, be it the data and coordinating everybody. What did some of the other people inside the City of Montreal think of this project? Was it something that had been done several times before? Was it a first? Did people think you were crazy taking this on? Like, what was the reaction from the rest of the organization?
I think the reaction was the collaboration. So that first it was okay, but we need to understand the project. And the second step was we want to collaborate with you for better learn from this project. So one of the good collaboration we had with the LUM, the Urban Innovation Laboratory, then is covering the parts related to the technology and data. So like some every pilot project, the first reaction is okay, we need to understand, and the second reaction is it's okay, we collaborate for learn this new technology and what kind of potential it's possible to take for the next steps in the shared mobility.
One of the common themes, I think, from this project, and I also attended some presentations yesterday. I think citizens are much more involved, much more aware, and much more open. That's my impression to some of these new solutions, because I think we're at the stage now where everybody's recognizing that parking is a bigger and bigger issue, and we need to think outside the box and not just build more parking structures. So it seems to be that you got some of that cooperation. Alessia, let me ask you something. If you had to do the project all over again, what were some of the lessons that you learned that you would maybe give some people advice here on something that you might have done differently if you did it again? Yeah. If you were doing the same project in Toronto next week, what would you maybe do a little bit differently this time?
I think they involved the community in the project. So more appropriation for the citizen, but we start with the employers, and I think the second step is to have some type of project with the mutualization of two different users.
Okay. Marc-Antoine, we have a question. Someone's asking, how many people need to be in the car for free carpooling?
Yeah, so specifically about the Montreal Cardiac Institute, it was just one. So as long as you have one passenger and one driver, boom, parking is free.
Yeah, total two. When you said one, I was like, okay, total two.
It just, you can't be alone, right? But other places, just maybe a little extension, to other places are different other customers. We do have, for example, when parkings are occupied in the city center, for example, they will change to business rules. So for instance, we do have here HEC. If you're driving alone, the parking is going to be $16 a day. If you're having one passenger, it's $6. And if you have two passengers, you get $6. Okay, so it depends really on the business rules. Every company is different depending on the right price points, the density, and everything. So,
I had a question from. Can you describe the challenges, if any, of having so many players involved in the project?
From our part, I would say that the replay factor is almost non-existent. But then again,
what do you mean? What do you mean the replay factor?
Well, it will be difficult to, for speed reason, if we go to Toronto, we go to Vancouver, we go to Calgary, we do this. remember that it was for example, we didn't know how to connect things with Genetec. We didn't know how to integrate with a city policy. We as a company learned a lot from this. A lot of things got more simple over time. Communication, for example, Alessia told us that we didn't know how to address the concerns of the citizens or the political elected officials. So now that we have it, and this is one of the purpose of this project, we streamlined the operations in a way that it's much more cookie cutter. Since the beginning of this project last year, we replicated this thing in other places in the greater Montreal area, right? But to the point, the challenges at the beginning, what you understand, what really was the key issues that legal or procurement or the police sector had to deal with. Once we understood that, we said, okay, we tweak the product here, we connect a few things there, and now it's much more a predictable cookie cutter projects when we go forward with this.
So one thing I know I was very curious about when I first learned about this, and I know my wife's company where she works is actually going to be or I think they already started with Netlift. So that was very curious when I first learned about this. What is the business model? I mean, the Montreal Heart Institute needs to generate revenue. How does the business model work? I'm sure a lot of people are curious about that.
Oh, of course. Well, to be absolutely transparent with everyone, we were doing carpool for a couple of years, and we tried and failed like a lot of other companies in our sector. To look at the business model in a way where we would reimburse people on a distance-based model, right? Think Uber, think BlaBlaCar in Europe. You travel 20 miles, you will get a few pennies per kilometers, and at the end of the day, you're going to get paid for that. That doesn't work. And we had to look at this very carefully and say, what exactly are the business drivers? Why would people carpool together? Why would they stick in the project? Not just get put in contact with someone else and that's it. And we discovered that talking to drivers, the reason why they would do this is if they have a free and reserved parking spot, because usually they struggle. We talk to people, for example, waking at 4:30 in the morning to beat traffic, to be able to get a spot. It could be at work, it could be in a park and ride for train stations, everywhere where parking is saturated. Carpooling, like think of it as a HOV parking instead of being an HOV line. You get a preference treatment if you're not alone. The problem was to prove it. If you're not alone, how do you prove it? I mean, you need to put an agent, put a camera to count how many people. There's a lot of abuse here. So this is where the LPR, when we met the first time we discovered Genetec 2 years ago, we understood that a license plate could work everywhere. It could work in a train station. It could work at work, at the office, on the streets. So we just needed to connect an app that was doing carpooling well. So the business model became a real estate model. We don't care really, and people don't really care about the distance travel. During the commute time, I mean, not very much an issue. What they care about is how costly, how difficult is it to park. And the moment we get this right, it completely changed our business case, okay? We became an extension of parking, not an extension of trying to fight traffic or climate change or connecting with transit. Those are too complicated. Customers don't want to get into this. But the moment I'm telling you, you get a free reserved parking all the time. The only thing you need to be is to be able to prove you're not alone. We started seeing drivers fight for passengers to be able to get this. Exactly like the HOV lines in the US. You don't want to pay $12 to enter the Lincoln Bridge in downtown Manhattan.
So you take a homeless guy.
You pick people up, right?
Yeah.
So the moment we got this right, it shifted our business case, and now we're all in with parking. Our best friends now are parking operators who said, I want to create more revenues. And think about it. If you have one parking spot and one car and one driver to pay for this, you can generate $100, $200 a month, right? But if you have 2 or 3 people per car, you have more wallets, more mobility dollars to pay for the single parking spot. So we sit with companies, we look at this and say, how much money do you need to operate your parking? And instead of having just 100 people for 100 parking spot, we could put 120, 150. This is what we need to do, as we did with Alessia and the team of Montreal. Let's look at the data, where people do live, where do they work, when are they shift workers or doctors? Forget about the doctor or senior management doing carpooling. They don't have the schedule for doing this. Perfect. So they will pay more for parking alone. But for the ones who can do the shift workers or the admin workers that could do this, they get a rebate, a real privilege. But we need to be the operators of that. And once we figure that out, it completely changed. I mean, the business is really thriving. Even during the COVID right now, hospitals can't work from home, so we still have a lot of demand coming from this very specific sector right now.
Okay, that's interesting. So in terms of motivating people to carpool, cash was not king, parking was king.
They have a job. They don't really care for $100 a month, right? I mean, with regards to all the constraints and problems involved, I mean, they have kids to drive at school or in regular times. They have to be at work in a specific times. The constraints are heavy for commuters. So we needed to find something else. And where's the pain point? It's parking. If you turn around 15 minutes to find a parking in the City of Montreal, it creates congestion, it creates problems. Let's figure out how, but I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the partner. You're operating a parking or a city, you need data, you need something. You can't just say, hey, I'm gonna open up that program, let's find out 12 spots here and it's gonna work. Not that easy, right?
You know, it's so true. One of the examples I give a lot is, you know, sometimes I'll buy something from, I don't know, let's say I have something from Walmart that cost $5 and my wife's telling me that, you know, you have to go return it. I can't be bothered for $5. I don't have the time, and if I'm going there, maybe I'll bring it. But if there's free parking, I'll drive an extra 3 blocks and walk to the hockey game because the parking's free. I'll still save $5 or $10, but free parking does motivate people.
And it's a bit more also because right now parking is also scratching its head with regards to how it's going to be the future of mobility. And we definitely think that cars and parking can play a role with regards to mobility, because public transit is expensive in specific areas, cannot work for everyone. And if we want to be a partner with them, this is what we're trying to achieve here. So then again, parking can play a role in mobility, but it's just a matter of, you know, finding the right business case together.
So I want to encourage everybody to answer some questions. I do have another question here. Someone's asking, how did you ensure resident stickers weren't abused by being sold or given away? So I don't know if that's a question more for Alessia or more for Marc-Antoine. Alessia, you're on mute.
I think this, what the S3 it's impossible to send another vehicles because the car number is in the sticker.
Okay. So just to be clear, the sticker was a visual indicator more to calm I think citizens down, but the actual sticker was tied to a license plate. The license plate is really what was used for enforcement. Is that correct?
For the residents, yes. For the pilot project, it's the stickers. It's related to the part of control of the data systems. So.
Okay. So someone says, I've heard that it's better to call it complimentary parking instead of free parking. It implies what you receive as value. Okay, that's you know, that's an amateur mistake I made. I shouldn't have.
No, me too. That. I mean, being French Canadian, usually the free is probably a synonym of complimentary. But thank you for that very interesting aspect, because you're right. This is the tricky part about parking. Everyone, parking has value, but it's free. I mean, parking has a much bigger value than what we actually pay for. So to understand our business case, we go there.
Okay. Alessia, in terms of popularity of this program, what is the feedback from the borough? And I know one of the challenges that we had with this program is literally once it started kicking into high gear, that's when we got hit by COVID, and encouraging people to get 3 or 4 in a car wasn't the brightest idea. But did we get any feedback initially from the borough? Did it seem to be positive? Was it well received, or was there a lot of negative pushback initially from the citizens?
For now, we don't have any complaints. So the response of the borough, it's positive. So we continue.
That's fantastic. And I think you told me you had a good relationship with the borough now.
Yeah, it's perfect. The collaboration with the borough is perfect.
Okay. Marc-Antoine, is this something that you think can apply to many different cities, or does it take like a life-changing parking experience like the ICM had?
Well, right now we're working on 3 countries, mostly France, Canada, and US. Okay, and what I can tell you is that there is a couple or 2 big constants here. When parking is saturated or expensive or both, there is a market for significant proportion of employees doing carpooling, but I cannot promise for the totality, because to make a carpool team work, you need a few parameters. For example, they need to share a vast portion of the same route. They have to work at the same schedule. So there are technical constraints out of it. So we need to pre-analyze that. And sometimes we look at the data, look at the maps, and we tell the customer, the corporation, you know what, you could expect 6% of your parking to be solved by this. Or you can expect 25%. Let me give you an example. I can't name names, but in the greater Montreal area, there was a company with about 3,000 parking spots, but 4,300 employees. So guess what? The accessibility was super difficult. We got 700 daily users in the first 3 weeks, okay? So because it immediately shifts. People see a new mobility option available right away. But to the flip side of it, there are places where it's not a matter of where, it's a matter of conditions. When parking is free and accessible, we tried and we dropped the ball on this. Carpooling is never the first choice. If people can drive, they will. If people like individual mobility is something that people love, including the bikes, the scooters, you name it, right? But traveling 20 miles on a bike, and I'm a cyclist myself, is pretty challenging. It's always, this is the narrative where we ask people to leave their cars and to switch for different modes of transportation, for heavy transit or bikings. That's great, but it depends on where you live. And most of the data we get is it's almost impossible for people to do this. So the feedback we got is, if I can't use my car, I'm going to quit the job. We've heard that from the union at the Montreal Heart Institute. Okay, so because of that, we said, okay, let's figure out basically with the data, what would be the potential, and then we give good answers. But as a company, we cannot have time spent on project that will not yield rewards. So it's important to be honest with everyone in the beginning.
Okay, I want to encourage people, please send in your questions and feel free to take yourself off of mic if you could post the questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So another question here is, how do you guarantee that they actually have multiple people in the vehicle? It's easy for them to say they do, but what if they drive to work that day and the carpool person isn't with them?
Yeah, so everything is done in the mobile app. Okay, so we basically, people will enter their work schedule or study in the app. I'm working from 9 to 5, blah, blah, blah. I'm living here and working there. And the algorithm of Netlift will start finding matches. And usually we have a group of 5 to 10 people all the way the same that could carpool together. The moment I drive, I will pick you up. I'm going to press the button on my app, right? So I have a GPS trace and a timestamp on when I picked you up as a colleague. And the moment I present my car to the parking lot, I read the license plate, and then there's this API call to Netlift. So, hey, I have a car here. Here's the license plate. Did they carpool this morning? Yes or no? I could have dropped you just in front of the door. I could be alone presenting myself, but I did carpool this morning and I prove it. So if the answer is yes, the gate will open. So it's impossible right now to break this. You don't need police, you don't need cameras, you don't need anything else than a license plate and the mobile app. The flip side of it is if you don't enter your rides in Netlift, the gate of the parking will not open, or you will be considered a visitor. You have to pay more, right? So this is how we can track the reduction of emissions, see how many people use it, give data to the City of Montreal. This is how we can learn things from the data.
So I think this is a very important part, a very important point you brought up. So although we trust people, there is some verification that happens. So if I'm carpooling with you, Marc-Antoine, when I drive there, I have an application on my phone. It knows where I am. It knows I showed up at your house, and it knows that we've made that connection. I mean, I guess technically you could put a dummy in I could show up to your house. You could throw a dummy in the car and duct tape your phone to it or something like that. But there is some validation. And when you show up, the LPR system reads the plate. It validates with your backend that car did in fact pick up someone, and then it lets that person in.
We have to, yeah, because otherwise we will not be able to prove anything. We cannot prove that you left your car at home, so we save a ton of GHG per year for you, because we obviously give this to the companies. We cannot tell the City of Montreal how many people really use this system and how many cars we remove from the from the streets. We used to have 600. If we have 500, we have to tell them, but how can we back it? And to the first, a couple of questions ago, I think it was Carol who asked this. This what became simpler for the next projects, because now the system is completely connected. We know how much it takes 4 weeks to order, install, calibrate, and deploy the cameras on the entrance of a parking lot, right? 4 weeks. Then the app is deployed in a matter of 2 weeks with the communications and everything. So in 6 to 8 weeks, everything's up and running, and we can not predict and guarantee the results, but give a very good potential, granted that the company is ready to play ball with this, right? Give some incentives here, rebates there, blah, blah, blah. So, and then we take over a portion of the parking, not all of it, but 10, 20, 30%, and we grow with them. We start small, we grow, and eventually we find the balance point where everybody's happy. Solo drivers have their way, carpoolers have their way, everybody's served, right? No one's left behind from a mobility point of view.
Yeah, I think that was just Shannon trying to find a cheat in the system so she could, cheat the system.
Of course.
I'm given the signal that we have 5 minutes left, so we have time for one more question. The data collection aspect is very interesting. Was there any pushback on data privacy? So maybe that's a question more for Alessia. Was there any concerns on privacy of the data that was being collected with the LPR?
Yes, of course. But we have at the City of Montreal a protocol of anonymization. We ask to Netlift to anonymize the data. So for the City of Montreal, we don't have personal data in the sharing with Netlift. So yeah, it's important to have this sensibility of the data now, and we study this part with the LUM, the Urban Innovation Lab, that it's an expert in open data. So we still analyze and we still evaluate the data in the pilot project.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and probably much more relevant now than ever before. So just to be clear, the LPR was able to collect data, was able to match permits, but the final data reports was, hey, we saw 27 cars here, 20 of them had permits, seven of them didn't have permits, but the actual license plate for those vehicles was anonymized, so yes, it's not something that was open to everybody. Marc-Antoine, is that some special functionality that you had to develop for the City of Montreal?
Well, that one was pretty simple and quick, but exactly. I mean, the City of Montreal cannot have personal data on its database. On the other hand, we have to for insurance policy, for payment, for relationship with employers, for example. But on the flip side, this is where basically the protocol of communication between the three actors, so the city, Netlift, and Genetec, this is how basically we had to create this protocol where we protect everyone from everyone and make sure that everybody gets the right information they need to operate without having too much information that would break this little, rules. And this is what we had to create in the beginning during the start of the project. But now it's reused, for example, in France with a little bit of new twist with different, like the GDPR or other criteria like this, but protecting, hosting data, being able to get back to it, is important. It's absolutely key.
So we're just about to wrap up, guys. I just want to add one more thing. So this solution of having a carpool solution, limited parking or scarcity of parking, having people carpool, validating with LPR, and giving them the privilege of either, paying them a few dollars, which didn't seem to work that well, but giving them better parking or HOV parking, as you call it. It makes a lot of sense now for the ICM because we're talking about the pandemic, but we had projects in the works for educational institutions. We had some private companies that now are more and more finding themselves with limited parking. As I mentioned, my wife's company signed up for this service as well. So this actually applies to much more than just the medical field. Yes,
the medical and the industrial sectors right now during the pandemic are the ones who cannot work from home. So those are the two sectors right now who are calling us a lot. But we understand also that the university campuses, some offices also that will eventually reopen. We don't know before maybe 2021, September or something like this. So we're not too stressed out, but we want to focus on when parking is scarce and difficult, this is where we know it works. Otherwise, we don't go there.
Sorry to cut you off. We're 1 minute away from the chop. So I just want to say thank you to Alessia. Thank you so much for your time. A special thank you to Mélanie for making the video. I know she's extremely busy, so we very much appreciate it. And of course, Marc-Antoine, thank you for joining the panel as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Chris, I wanted to say that you did a really marvelous job moderating this session. So very good, extremely good information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.